Chapter 14. Nock had already lain awake for an hour before she decided to give up on going back to sleep. The sky was still dark. Maybe she could get in some firefighting drills before her parents woke. As she nothing stepped down the staircase, she heard the sounds of their housekeeper in the kitchen. Nock peered her head inside and bowed to the old woman. "Good morning, Mrs. Vaboon," she said. The woman gave a little cry and wheeled around. "Oh, Nock, you scared me. You're up much too early. Young ladies like you should sleep late." "I'm not up any earlier than you are. Can I help you?" Mrs. Vaboon scratched at the talcum powder cake to her neck. "Thank you, but I'm just finishing up making some fish and rice for the monks. I'll take it to the village square, then I'll come back and start your breakfast. Your mother told me that you two are going to visit the school today. That should be fun." Nock's stomach clenched. Her mother hadn't said anything about visiting the school. It could be a charity visit, Nock told herself. Her mother was always going to places like schools and shelters and giving them money. But if that were the case, she wouldn't take Nock with her. No, the only reason would be to introduce her to her future teachers. "Well, maybe I just won't be here when she wakes up then." "Mrs. Vaboon, why don't you let me take the food to the monks this morning?" Nock asked. "Are you sure?" asked the woman as Nock stepped into the kitchen. "If you don't mind, that would be helpful." "I don't mind at all," said Nock, taking the covered dish. "I never get to do this at home. And besides, I'd like to see Father Cham again." Before the sun rose, Nock walked up the road to the village, the fresh smell of green herbs and steamed fish rising up from the dish. It was true, she did want to see Father Cham again. He'd talked with her father for a long time when they arrived, and even though the two of them disagreed on almost everything, Nock liked the old monk right from the start. By the time she got to the village square, the sky was pale gray, and the monks had almost finished their walkthrough. Nock slipped off her shoes and joined the villagers standing in line. They all held dishes of food, and as the monks came to them, they spooned it into their wooden bowls. Father Cham wasn't there, so Nock gave the fish to the other monks. Afterward, she stood beneath a tree, watching the villagers. It was a market day, and people had come from the surrounding countryside to buy and sell goods on the main street. Nock's eyes wandered to the row of shops along the road. In the center, a grocery store sold vegetables and takeaway meals wrapped in banana leaves. The shop owner had just finished setting up a tidy pyramid of fresh-baked sweets, golden egg flour cakes, the insides probably stuffed with sweet beans or pineapple jelly. Nock's mouth watered. She started to get up, planning to buy some to take back to Mrs. Vaboon, when she saw a brown, five-legged spider crawling on the display. It took her a minute to realize it was a hand. The hand belonged to a barefoot little boy. His fingers curled around one of the cakes and slipped it off the pile. But in his hurry, the boy sent the rest of the sweets rolling off the table onto the ground. The shop owner ran out of his store, puffing and cursing. "Blast! My sunrise cakes! They're covered in dust and dirt." Nock watched as the people standing nearby came to help clean up the mess. The boy was long gone. It seemed that no one but her had seen what happened. And there you have it, she thought. Thieving, out in the open. When people don't live with rules, this is exactly what happens. Nock crossed the square, following where she'd seen the barefoot boy disappear to. If she caught him, it would help her father make his case to Father Cham about the need for orbs and laws. She held her hands at her side, ready to spring out and grab him. But when she rounded the corner, she saw that someone else had beaten her to it. One of the monks knelt beside the boy, who still clutched the sticky cake in his hand. The boy stared back with wide eyes, nodding tearfully. The monk was young, just a novice. Nock nothing stepped closer to hear what he was saying to the little thief. "You know better than that," said the young monk sternly. "So we're agreed. First thing tomorrow." "Okay, then. You'd better keep your promise. Run along." "Run on," blurted Nock, closing the remaining distance between them. "Are you seriously letting him go?" Both the boy and the monk twisted to look at her, startled. "Excuse me," Nock started again, bowing to the young monk this time, "but you must not have seen what just happened. This boy stole a cake from that shop, and in the process ruined the entire batch." The monk turned his head away from her and looked down at the ground. "I did see it, miss." "Well, then, I'm sure you'll agree that we can't just let him run off with a cake in his hands," said Nock, trying her best to sound respectful. "He needs to at least go back and pay for it." The little boy's lip started to shake. "He can't afford it," whispered the monk. "Well, he should have thought of that before he took it." I'm sorry, whimpered the little boy. He'd crushed the cake into a sticky mush in his hand. "He knows what he did is wrong," said the monk. He tapped the boy on the arm. "Don't you?" The boy nodded, sniffling. The monk kept his face turned away, avoiding looking into Nock's eyes. She supposed this was because she was a girl. She took a step back to try to make him feel less awkward, but she wasn't going to back down. "That doesn't really help the baker," she said. "He's now got 40 ruined cakes on his hands." The monk stood up, keeping his chin tucked down. For a moment, Nock thought he was backing off. He took a step back, then forward again, as though he couldn't decide what to do. In the end, he planted his feet and then spoke quietly so only Nock could hear. "Look at him," he said, nodding at the snot-soaked boy. "He hasn't stolen anything before, and he won't do it again, that's for sure. There's no sense in shaming him further. That man, the baker, he's got a bad temper. If you go tell him what happened right now, he'll blow up and maybe have the boy whipped. Or worse, make the family come into town and pay for the cakes. And they can't. They're very poor. He promised me that he'll come every day for a week to volunteer at the shop to make up for it, right after school. That's good enough, don't you think?" Nock's shoulders tensed. School. The same school that her parents wanted to drag her to this morning. The one they wanted to leave her at. She was running out of time to do something to save herself. Bringing this little boy to justice was hardly the impressive feat she needed to accomplish, but she was feeling desperate. "I'm sorry," she said firmly, "but it's just not the way we do things in Chitana. The boy needs to come with me. Don't worry, I'll make sure he isn't whipped." She reached out for the child. "Come on, let's go." But before she could take the boy's hand, the monk stepped in between them. "Go on, run," he whispered to the boy over his shoulder. The little boy didn't need to be told twice. He shot off into the forest, leaving the crumbled cake on the ground. "Stop!" called Nock. Too late. He was gone. "What was that boy's name?" she demanded of the monk in training. "What boy?" Nock realized he hadn't used the boy's name the entire time on purpose. Now the monk did glance up at her, just for an instant. It was long enough for her to see a flicker of defiance in his eyes. It was so striking that Nock took a step back. She'd seen eyes like that somewhere before. Do I know you?" she asked. "Brother Pong!" called a voice, far away but growing closer. Pong. Had she ever known a boy named Pong? "Brother Pong!" A lanky monk whirled around the corner and stumbled toward them, panting. "There you are," he gasped. "You've got to come, quick." "What's wrong?" asked the monk in training. "It's Father Cham. He's fallen.